Welcome to Volume 9 Meet the Authors event, Language and Landscape with Len Murusalu and Alessandra Baltodano. Stories have the ability to bring us together around a collective imagination and create refuge where we can connect with other people and the world. This is why at Wimblu, we have set out to create spaces of community around our stories to come together to navigate these uncertain times, connect with different perspectives, and imagine other possible worlds. The Meet the Authors encounters are part of our efforts to connect the persons behind the stories and create a community of storytellers addressing the intersections of ecology and spirituality. These conversations allow us to delve deeper into the themes that each story explores, the creative processes involved, and the worldviews from which they emerge. So welcome again to the event, Language and Landscape, with Len Murusalu and Alessandra Baltodano, both authors of Volume 9 under the theme of language from our Wimblu magazine. So our first guest I'm going to present is Len Murusalu, a visual artist, filmmaker, artist film creator, and researcher from Estonia. Her interdisciplinary work explores questions around the interpretation of history, memory, language, and time perception using moving image, video performance, photography, sound, text, installation, and painting. She is the author of a short film, After Betelgeuse, a journey through the past and future myths of the dormant Livonian language. And our second guest is Alessandra Baltodano, Alessandro's co-founder and content director at Wimblu. She's also a documentarian, and through her work, she explores the affective and existential and spiritual dimensions of the relationship between human beings and their inner and outer landscapes. Her work is inspired and informed by the fields of environmental humanities, ecofeminism, and spiritual ecology. She's the author of the multimedia story Silence, a story about the space that contains us. So, both of stories that you share on Volume 9 explore a dimension of language that has to do with recognizing language as a being with its own agency that emerges from the landscape and flows through our bodies to go out into the world. And in the other hand, in both of stories, we recognize a need to quiet the discursive mind in order to listen to the world and to connect with the landscapes we inhabit. So I would like to start the conversation by asking you, each of you, and how these stories emerge in each of you, and why choose film in Len's case and multimedia in Alessandra's case to tell them. Maybe we can start with Len if you want.
I have to say that in my case, it wasn't not even about the film, but it was about the atmosphere. Because sound also has a really important place in the story. It's actually the reason why the film is there. It was the inspirational source of this idea. So I would say that that atmosphere would be the medium for me.
That's so beautiful, yeah. And it does come through in your film, you know, it's so atmospheric. I love that. I guess in my case, this story really emerged from the process of doing this edition. There were some things in that story that I've been thinking and like reflecting about for a while, but to speak particularly about silence, like this idea of silence, I think it really came for me in the process of doing this edition, and how important silence is for language, and you know, thinking that if we were going to speak about language, we really need to speak about silence. And then I think that the format, because this is an essay, of course, there's writing, but there's also the videos. And I just think that it's like, for me, throughout the years, recording or filming has been this way of finding silence. It's become sort of like this observational practice to do in silence without judgment, like this kind of space that I'm trying to describe. in the essay, that's what film has become for me, you know, like this sort of space where I can let go of this discursive mind and just observe what's in front of me. And so I guess the idea of having it as a multimedia story was to try and offer that back to the audience, you know, that sort of space that I've created for myself, I guess.
Interesting that you say that, because yeah, you choose to like show some videos, but in silence at the same time. Like the only video that has any sound is the last one, so that's kind of an statement as well. And it has like images of a really rough wind, but in silence. So it's a different experience in the sense of the materiality of how we understand silence. And in the other case, Len's answer, it totally makes sense when you see the movie. It's like the sun is guiding the whole journey, but at the same time, the images allow you to enter into this like atmosphere where sound is really relevant. And I want to go to the to ask Len, because there's a really very interesting idea in your story, uh, and it's the one that landscapes can be repositories of cultures that inhabit them over time, and therefore of languages that were used, and that these traits live on in the bodies of the people who inhabit these landscapes today. At least that's one interpretation. Could you tell us about the relationship between memory, landscape, and bodies that you explore in After Betelgeuse?
Yes, of course. This also a huge inspiration source was this idea or a concept of chronesthesia, which is a term coined by a neuroscientist called Endel Tulving, and it basically talks about human brain's ability to travel simultaneously between past, present, and the future, because the place where we store our memories is the same place in our brain where we create our dreams. So in that sense, if there is a landscape which seemingly doesn't have any stories or has a personal story happening in a particular present, there are still certain stories that are there. And for me, in those turbulent times, memory is also kind of like act of resistance to really fight for something we believe in, and not to lose who we are as human beings.
That's really beautiful, and that fact that you share about how we store the same in the same place, our brain, the memories and dreams, is really interesting. And I want to know if Alessandra has anything to say about this as well, like
Yeah, no, I was just as stunned as you with this fact, you know, that these dreams and memories happening in the same place. And I just find it curious that when I was doing my essay, I was also researching a little bit about how the brain works, you know, and what happens in the brain during meditation, and these very interesting spaces in our brain that have these very particular functions, you know, into our, you know, as in curating our experience of reality in a way. And if we think about it, brains are a product of the environment as well. You know, they were made by the earth as much as a tree or a bird, or, you know, whatever emerges from the earth. Our brain is one of those things, and it's, for me, it's just so mind-blowing and magnificent, you know, whenever you learn these little curious facts about how our brain works, and then you have to go back to the idea that, oh, the earth did this, you know. It's like Earth created this whole mechanism for us to experience reality. It's, I don't know, for me it's just crazy.
And it brings also this idea of where does the what does is the memory store only in the brain as well? You know, like if
Mm.
it's something that is actually contained in one place only. So it's a really interesting thought, and at the same time, the what Len was saying about the almost like an act of resistance is really interesting because there is always like um I would say like some type of um, activation that you want to create on the spectator when you watch this film, not only in the sense of when you actually listen to Len talking about the film, but when you're looking at it and when you are like sitting down and having this experience, it's something that then when you think about how we are used to like being in documentary films, mostly more traditional, like told everything, and it's a really act of resistance at the same time to put so much like emphasis on the sound and also creating this two images game. Alessandra, in your story, you suggest letting silence into our lives in order to listen to other voices, connect with the earth, and awaken spirituality in ourselves. It is as if silence is a liberator of many of the limits that language draws. Um, could you go deeper into this idea, and why do you think it is also necessary to get out of the limits of language?
Hmm. I think that again, I need to go back to the process of doing this edition. I think I learned so much about, yeah, that exactly that, the limits of language. And I declare myself like a lover of language. I am in constant awe of what language can do, and like the magic of language. But I think something that became very clear for me was that to rely on language to sort of translate or give form to all our experience is it's impossible, and we've sort of given language that task, and it doesn't work, you know, simply because I write something like this in the essay, that the language that we use to describe experience, it's not experience. It's already an interpretation. It's already a translation of experience. And so I think that we need to go like a step back, you know, and say, okay, what is it that contains language? What is larger than language? And what this essay is, it's an exploration of or playing with the idea that what actually contains us is silence, you know, that what is capable of containing everything is silence, precisely because it's not trying to translate it or interpret it or turn it into something else. It's just holding it, holding space for it. And I do want to say that there was like this very specific inspiration for this idea, and it's a poem by Mary Oliver called Praying. And her last line says something like, it's this idea that praying is a doorway into a silence where you can hear um, different voices, or another, where another voice may speak. I think it's what the poem says. And you know, it made me think a lot, because what is this another voice? You know, that we have this idea that spirituality is this disembodied voice somewhere in the ether. But I actually think that, and if you read other of Mary Oliver poems, she's actually speaking about listening to the world, you know, that once we sort of silence this thinking mind, there is so many voices speaking around us, you know. And the idea that she was linking that to prayer, I found it very beautiful, and like a very, and to me that was a doorway to exploring this essay, you know, that what if actually praying is all about creating this silence, you know. And then I had this memory about my grandma, praying every night, and like this silence that kind of was created by her praying. And as a person who grew up without any specific religion or religious practice, I have sort of had to craft my own relationship to praying with the years, so this idea of listening and observing without putting so many ideas on top of it, I really wanted to explore that in this essay. Yeah.
It's very interesting because that has some relationship with the Len's exploration on the Livonian language, where we don't really know the meaning of the words, but there is something in the words and in this language that is awakening something in her body, so it's really interesting how it's also can language also provoke that in the persons that listen to it. Or so I don't know if you want to add any about that, Len, or on this conversation about the limits of language.
Yes, when I listen to Alessandra's really kind of wise words about the need to have kind of like a universal language, then I started to think about intuition. That maybe intuition is something universal in us that can be a language in silence. Because when I mentioned before that that memory is an act of resistance, then in a way silence is an act of resistance as well, because it's so difficult to achieve it. And especially these days when there's so much difficult reality around us, but also this kind of solastalgia in us, this grief that we know that the environment is changing, and I'm just wondering recently, and I have this question to you both. What do you think if in the times like this, if it's even possible to achieve this this language of silence? Is there hope?
Yeah. Well, I think you're aiming at the whole reason why Wimblu exists. I think this is exactly what we kind of try to do, to create this refuge, this sort of like space of silence, which is not a lack of sound, it's not it's not even the lack of thoughts, but it's actually an awareness of what is in the silence, um, I guess like a more careful attention to what it is that we are filling our minds with. So I do think that I do have hope, not in the sense that you sit down and expect everything to be okay, but sort of like in the way that there's so much still here, there's so much still here to pay attention to, and there's yeah, and I love you use this phrasing to speak about your film, that I love, that it's about this language awakening a sense of recognition. And I think these three words are so precise and beautiful, because it's not exactly understanding, like Paulo was saying. It's not that we know exactly what the words mean, but it's that we feel in ourselves a sense of familiarity, of belonging, of recognition that doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, to be felt and true. And I think this is, I think this, at least this is what I love about your film, you're pointing towards this, that in every landscape, there is a language that evokes a sense of recognition, even if you don't exactly understand it. Yeah.
And well, I think you kind of like throw me the question that I was going to throw to you guys, because I think that we are actually in a position as authors of creating stories that is really relevant, even though we think that probably it's not. You know, we think sometimes we find ourselves probably talking to the same people, or we think our message is not going somewhere, but I think I have hope that it is getting somewhere, and that the stories at the end will overpass facts and statistics and all these things that is overflowing our current lives, that is not actually, is not letting us process what is happening, right? It's not helping us, like you said, Len, in this grief process that we unconsciously we are all part of. So I mean, you could be conscious that you are part of, but most people are unconsciously in grief right now. So I was gonna ask actually, like because both the stories invite us to embrace this uncertainty, the mysterious, that we cannot explain with words. And do you think right now that is important in our current context of eco-social crisis to let the uncertain, the mysterious into our conversations, stories, myths about our relationship with the earth? And if you do, why do you think it is important?
So, so my film is, let's say, geographically located what is now northern Latvia, and its language is dormant ever since 2013 officially. I love the word dormant in English instead of extinct, because there's still some kind of hope. But what we really, I think, should appreciate about this dormant culture is that it was indigenous and it was really, really close to nature. So I always feel that there's the key, that that if we go back as, you know, humans close to back to our roots, basically, then maybe there's some hope. And this is what we can learn from myths, from indigenous cultures, from dormant languages, because there are some keys.
I actually love that you're pointing out to this word dormant, because I think, to me at least, I mean, it feels like something went to sleep, right? And then you have to ask, where is it sleeping? Like, where is it where is it like resting, you know? And your film, I mean, I think it's very beautiful because it's kind of um like, yeah, it's speculating with the answer to this question, where is it? And you have the traveler, so it's in their bodies, you know, and you have the landscape, so it's in the land as well, and you have the myths, so it's in the myths, you know. You're sort of like, I feel like your whole film is kind of a map. You know, it's like you're kind of like putting together a map on how to find this dormant language, you know, how to find your way to it, and how to find your way to memory, and how to find your way to, as you say, resistance, and back home, back to your roots, as you're saying. Yeah, I think that's very beautiful. And I
But
mean,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just think I love this word home right now, because I've through this journey I've realized that this home can really be anywhere. And in your story, Silence, it's interesting that it has this segment about Estonia, about the Estonian landscape, and how it created some sort of sense of peace. And I am originally from Estonia, and I really started to think about it, that I necessarily might not have the same experience there, but I perhaps can have the same experience what you would call your native country. So it's interesting that this home really can be anywhere. And I very recently did Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage. And it was a long journey. But when I went back to my homeland, Estonia, then I realized that this Camino, or the way, actually goes from there as well. And in every country, basically, you are on the road. So in the sense, you don't really need to go to Spain to be on this journey, on this pilgrimage. But you can be a pilgrim anywhere, really. And I realized that even before I went to do this walk, I was a pilgrim. I just didn't know that. I basically had to go there to understand that that this has always been my journey.
Yeah, no, I love that, and there's so much to unpack there on what you're saying. I think there is this maybe stereotype in a way that this sort of like spirituality or home is like sitting in a single place, right? But actually, if we look at the history of humans, I mean, it's very new that we're staying in just one place, you know, like we've been moving throughout history and evolution, and as you were mentioning, you know, there are so many practices of self-knowledge and like spiritual practices that depend on moving, you know, that depend on getting your body somewhere else. And I want to go back to something that Paulo was mentioning when we were speaking about the brain, that is it because our experience is not only dependent on our self, whatever that is, you know, it's our self in relationship to something else. So I think what you're kind of talking about, Len, is that, you know, I took my body to Estonia and something emerged from the contact between my body and that landscape. That it's not, as you say, necessarily the experience that everyone will have, because it's a single landscape with a single person, and everyone, there's a universe of possibilities there, right? So yeah, no, I do agree with what you're saying, that it's not that you need to go to a particular place to have an experience. It's actually, I think, about paying attention about these in-between spaces between you and the land, between your own body and the land, and what's emerging from that. Like, yeah, like if you really put yourself in front of whatever it is that you have and pay a little bit more attention than usually, like what's going to emerge there. And I was recently at a talk by this man called Silvio Lang, and he had this beautiful definition that he said that emotions are always a story of contact. So basically what he was saying is that with whatever you feel, it's really just a story about a contact between two skins, two bodies, two, you know, yourself and the land, yourself and another person, yourself and another being. And the emotion is sort of this story that emerges from this contact. So I think that, you know, and I've tried to go back to Pablo's question about the mysterious, is precisely this, that what's in between, it's so mysterious, you know, like I can have a sense of self. There's a sense that there is someone, that it's an other, you know, that it's not me, which is sort of like this illusion of separation. But then there's this in between, that it's like a universe of possibilities, and what emerges from being with each other, it's just always unpredictable, you know. And I think that is like the beautiful and the very difficult thing of being alive, you know, that we have to learn how to be with each other, and we are not in control of what emerges from in between. And I think, again, to go back to the question, is that one of the things that for me stories can do, like in times like these, is to create a safe space where we can be with that uncomfortable feeling of, being with something that is different, or with being with an emotion, or being with ourselves even. I often try to compare stories to rehab centers in the sense that they create a sort of like safe space where you can practice things that you're not ready to practice in real life. So stories create this like this world that it's very real. It makes you feel things that are real. It makes you experience things that are real, but maybe in a safer container than if you're already doing it in your real life. And they give you a space to practice something that then you go out and you practice with your neighbor, or with a tree outside of your house, or with a landscape across the other side of the world. I don't know. I think that's when you say, Pablo, about letting stories sit with the mysterious, I think more about letting stories sit with what's uncomfortable, like creating spaces where we can sit with what's uncomfortable not to know. Yeah.
Well, I love the answers, and I think mystery could be really uncomfortable for some people nowadays. So that's why I think also like it's really interested in your answers, like stories that embrace complexity in all its like range, and also I love Len bringing up these words. Now that we're speaking about language, dormant, home, pilgrimage, I think this is type of what I think is powerful about both of your stories, that are not kind of giving us answers, are creating questions that will dwell in ours and our bodies as well, in a sense that that story continues in our minds. So it's really beautiful, and I think they support this I would say uh, sense of time scale as well, looking at each other as humans, coming back to landscapes that have been here for so much time than ourselves. And so it's a recognition of that as well. So I really think this mystery, uncertainty has to do with that it's too hard for us to like recognize ourselves as really, really ephemeral beings, and really, really with a really short life compared to others. So I want to also ask you the last question, which is more like personal, because both the stories appeal to a disposition towards the world that allow us to listen, to free ourselves from noise, from the discursive mind, to let voices that often go unnoticed, or we simply do not know they exist, enter our bodies without any like interest or disinterestedly. What have you learned about this disposition, and how has this nourished your relationship with the landscapes you inhabit today? I believe Len, in Estonia, I would say is where you live the most. So that's what the landscape I'm referring to, the one that you live in.
Well, I cannot even say that I've lived there most, but let's say that it's been one of the places where I lived. But this one word I would like to add in this row of different thoughts we've talked about today, that has also do so much both with memory and landscape, is a word, and also prayer when we think about silence piece. And this word is ritual. And I've been thinking about this word ritual recently a lot, because I'm questioning perhaps this can somehow be our one of our universal conversations, because rituals have changed over time. We don't celebrate the same festivities anymore that we did thousands of years ago. Also in Eastern culture or Western culture or Southern, Northern, these are all different, right? But what is the same, is humans' need for certain ritual. Maybe because it brings people together, maybe it connects us with each other or with the world. So that's something that that I've recently been thinking about a lot. And one really fun fact regarding my film, the protagonist is called Riek, which in Livonian language, I translate it as a traveler, but Riek is actually a road and Keie is a walker. So it's more like a path walker.
Mm.
It translates like this. And when I was editing this film, then I started to write on my wrist this word, Riek, in August 2021. And I was doing it every day to kind of remind me that I'm a path walker. And all my friends told me that, okay, if you do it for 1 year, then you should make a tattoo. But after 1 year, I realized that if I would make a tattoo, then it's not this ritual anymore. And instead, I've been doing it every day, sometimes several times per day, if it's, if I'm swimming or if it's raining. And this really reminds me that it's a journey.
I want to say about ritual that I love the way that you are framing it, because ritual can be a scary word. It feels like you need to have a ceremony and like dress in a certain way and and what you're saying really is what ritual actually is, which is a practice to pay attention. It's a practice to ground yourself. And for me, I think, I've been through a lot of like meditation classes and like yoga and this whole thing, and I love it. And I really appreciate what they did for me. Because really what they did is to notice that everything can be an opportunity to pay attention, that doing the dishes is a doorway into here as well, and cooking for me as well, it has become a very important part of my life, just cooking and being in relationship with food. And when I think about how memory like manifests, is the fact, this is it, we remember what we like to eat in a way. And that's a lot of what defines us, as living beings, is that our body remembers the pleasure of contact with other things, and then we live our life seeking this sort of contact, this story again, and so I think that for me it has been that, just sort of like understanding that every single breath in this life is an opportunity for being here, and being present for what is here, and being in relationship with what is here. And while I find the mind astonishingly wonderful, that I really, I'm in deep awe of what our minds can do, I'm also I'm more and more doubtful about how good a place this is to be, like I don't think the mind is a place to be. The mind is something that helps us do, but I try to bring myself back as much as possible to whatever is in front of me, because otherwise the mind is in places that are not here. It's like this ability that you were speaking, like this ability of the mind to move through time is so useful. It's so important. It's so crucial to our survival. But it can get in the way of experience. It can get in the way of what is right in front of us. And I actually just today I found another poem by Mary Oliver that I had never read. And in this poem, there is a line that says that I know I can walk through the world along the shore or under the trees with my mind filled with things of little importance, in full self-attendance, a condition I can't really call being alive. And I think for me, this is it. It's like if we spend our lives in our mind, can we really call this being alive with like so self-centered, so worried with ourselves, who are like these fleeting beings who are going to be here for so short, and then missing the trees and missing the birds and missing everything that is happening around, that it's so wonderful and will definitely outlive us. And for me, this is it, it's to understand that the actual memory of life, of the world, of everything that this earth has done, it sits in places. It's like this title of this ethnography that says wisdom sits in places. So wherever we are, we need to pay attention to what this place knows and what this place is saying and what this place makes us feel. And to see our bodies at these also as these landscapes of memory, as these that we can go on to explore for the rest of our lives. I think it's so interesting that humans, our memories start late in life. The first memory that we have rationally, um, I don't know. I don't know about cognitively what it is, but I know it's not right from the beginning that we emerge in this earth. And so there is so much that sits somewhere else in our bodies and that suddenly is awakened because you hear a song or because you smell something or because you find yourself in a place that is completely new and different to you. And then the body is sort of remembering all the time. It's kind of like things emerging from this contact that is the memory of your body with the memory of the land. And I think that for me, it's just that I'm in a constant attempt not to miss out, not to miss out on this like very short experience of being alive.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, both of you. Really nice conversation. I want to open up now the time for anybody that is participating on the meeting. I see Carolina and Diana and Matt in I don't know if you have any question or you want to share some opinion, you can do so now. Just open.
I think there is actually a comment, Paulo, in the chat that maybe Len can respond to because it's directed to.
Okay, let me read it. Okay, yes, it says, Diana and Matt, they say, what I love about the idea of dormancy, thank you, Len, is the idea of existing in an almost dream state, awaiting for the right time to reappear. The hope and capacity is always there to reawaken. It's more like a
Yes,
concept,
and,
right?
and it's exactly what Alessandra just mentioned as well, that there is certain information in ourselves and in the places that that surround us. Also, our ancestors knew better about certain things, so we need to relearn certain things that were quite natural back in the days. And I think what a beautiful example from Livonian language, for example, is this, that it's a gender neutral language where you can use the same word she, he, it for both men and women, animals, and also some very special plants. You can use this word. So if you think about language, it's actually like this kind of segregation maybe somehow unconsciously also influences us. So I think it's beautiful that there are some languages that doesn't do that, and maybe, well, it's something we can learn from, or I definitely am thinking about it in my life.
I think that this is really interesting because we tend to think about languages as also something that is solid rock and maybe unchangeable. in a sense. We believe, we see languages, if we see them as that, in that perspective, it is really hopeless, like if you think, but I think languages, they have their own trajectories, and we today we don't speak the same language, the same Spanish that we used to speak 20, 20, 30 years ago, and probably 100 years ago it was totally different. So when we see like the scale and the time scale languages, they also have they change, and they change because of the people who speak them, like, and what the thoughts they want to convey on these words, and how they want to change the order of the words. Is really, really powerful if you and it's also dangerous to give all this responsibility to language without thinking that they're the ones who are actually promoting certain type of language. It's really seeing it as a something that is changing all the time with our thoughts as well. I don't know if Aji wants to say something else, or anyone.
No, I think, yeah, there's something very important about what Len is saying, and it's that, in a way, language, and especially, indigenous languages that emerge from the land where they're at, it's that they are sort of cues for relationship. In a way, like words are kind of guiding you into how to relate to everything, to the landscape, to time. I actually wanted to mention that I, for example, find it very beautiful that in Estonia, you have the exact same word for month and moon. In English, of course, it is related, but it's not the same word. In Estonian, you literally need to say, I'm going to be away for 3 moons. And then it's like, there's no way you can disconnect time from the cycle of the moon, like it's there. It's you have to mention it every time you're going to speak about, these monthly periods in a way. Or there are like other words that are so like straightforward, like you have this word, I think maybe it's hanger, that you call it like something like of the tree. I can't remember right now. What's the word that you have for hanger? Like the things where you hang. It's like a tree for clothes. That's what you call hangers, right?
It's difficult right now. I'm still so mesmerized because I never ever thought that moon and month are exactly the same word. And this is exactly why I'm saying that the place sometimes it needs to be discovered, As if I'm
exactly.
there, then I've never kind of thought about it. So thank you for pointing that out.
You have ridepuu. What's a hanger? It's like it's a tree for clothes,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So it's crazy. It's like I love it. It's like or you have this word for octopus. You call them like 8 legs or something like this. So I really love like what this language does, and I'm sure, as you say, that Spanish has these things too, and I overlook them all the time. But as you say, when you go into this different landscape and you listen to the language, you kind of understand like why you have certain attention towards landscape that maybe we don't have, and it's like the guidance is in the words somehow, and you're not even realizing it, as you just said. Language is sort of doing a work in you that it's mysterious in a way, that it's not conscious. Yeah.
If you want to support our project, you can share this episode, visit our digital magazine wimblu.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our Patreon community where you can access exclusive content starting at $3 a month. Your support allows us to create and share content that reimagines a fair and healthy world for all life forms.